Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Alabi.
I'm Tundra Abiola.
I'm Veronica Adeka. Welcome back.
Only last week, President Muhammad Buhari, not for the first time, renewed his vow to fight insecurity to a standstill. It will be recalled that even while he was away, terrorists Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa province, and other non-state actors were unrelenting in their attacks on civilian and military targets in the northeast of the country. Hundreds of lives were also being lost in Zamfara, next door to President Buhari's home state of Katsina. And the body bags continue to mount. In the meantime, President Buhari met with service chiefs last week, ostensibly to explore possible new ways of tackling the worrisome situation. What could they have discussed, and what really needs to be done at this point to begin to turn the table on terrorists and violence? For more of a detailed look at this, we're now joined by Kabir Adamu, an Abuja-based security expert. Kabir, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Thank you, Biola. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just, Kabir, it's always good to have you on, but it also isn't, because whenever we have you on, it means that there has been a spike in insecurity or insecurity concerns. The last couple of weeks have actually been unprecedented, or maybe precedented, but once again, a spike in violence across the country, really, the Northeast specifically. What does this new statement mean from the president of fighting insecurity to a standstill? What can we make of this, and what real actions have you seen that make you feel that this is actually going to happen this time? We want concrete action points that the president is taking and the security officials are taking. Kabir.
Well, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He is the head of the executive arm of government. Because of the way our government is structured, virtually everyone in the country waits for his body language, his utterances, and sometimes even indications by him. So when he comes out to make speeches like that, we are hoping that it would trickle down to heads of security departments, his aides, and others, and that they would respond accordingly. Very importantly is the meeting he held with the service chiefs within the week, where he also reiterated his commitment to tackle insecurity, and where we are told they briefed him, gave him an update on what their various departments have done, and the chief of naval staff actually fielded questions from journalists at the end of that meeting. So yes, it appears there is a new vigor to tackle security challenges across the country. Also, very importantly, the acting inspector general of police, Mohammed Adamu, gave an update on Operation Puff Adder, where he mentioned new strategies, quote and unquote, for fighting security challenges, in particular banditry and kidnapping. So there is that new vigor from the government itself, and especially the heads of security department. However, part of what we've been talking about, and which we are yet to see, is an overaching corresponding coordinating function from all of these security departments. They are still operating in silos. They are still responding, knee-jerk response, if I'll call it that. We do not have, at the policy level and at the strategic level, a coordinated function of all of these organizations. That is what really worries me. I know that the government has come up with a statement regarding community policing, and it has gone ahead to launch a committee under the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, which has input from the Acting Inspector General of Police and the Office of the National Security Advisor to develop a framework for implementing community policing. And from what we are hearing, that is coming from an input of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, COS 40, 2018, where it was asked by President Buhari to research into the reasons why community policing has failed in Nigeria, and to come up with models and suggestions for the introduction of a framework that would work in Nigeria. So we're hoping that this particular committee will work with the incoming 9th Assembly. Remember that the 8th Assembly has introduced the Police Trust Fund. It has a bill on Police Trust Fund. It has also introduced a reform bill on policing. So we're hoping that all of this will come together into making sure that we have an improved policing function to help tackle the various internal security challenges that we have across the country.
Just quickly, I don't want to lose this. You brought up the possibility of community policing. One of the things in the past has been that community policing and vigilante groups have also sort of they've been co-opted. So community policing has been co-opted into vigilante groups. How do we prevent that, and what is your take on some of those vigilante groups that are operating as part of a community policing unit?
Okay, so we need to distinguish between community policing and then community police. When you speak about vigilantes, my understanding is that that is really community police. But community policing is a philosophy. It is a required structural redirection of the Nigerian police force. It can incorporate community police, such as vigilantes, but the two are very different. One of the greatest, I would say, misnomer that is occurring currently in Nigeria is the discourse that as if community policing is a new thing. No, it's not a new thing. It was first introduced as far back as 2004 by former President Obasanjo, where it was piloted in 7 states. And sometimes later it was extended to about 18 states across the country. Now, most analysts have looked into the essence of why community policing has failed in the 18 states where it was piloted. So the current discourse is around how do you make sure community policing works effectively. Now, remember, the whole objective of community policing is to change the current ethos of policing, where it's a top-bottom approach. The IG sits in Abuja and gives directives. Now, community policing would remove that. It would bring policing down to you and I. In fact, more importantly, to the market woman, to the villager, who would now tell the police, these are my challenges. So in Zamfara, banditry is the challenge. In Northeast, terrorism is the challenge. And then the police would sit with the community for 2 functions. The proactive function, which is to prevent the occurrence of the crime or whatever security challenge, and then the reactive element, which is where it occurs, make sure it's intelligence-driven, and then you arrest and you prosecute the offender. Now, that, in essence, is community policing. Now, in the last almost 20-something years that it's been introduced in Nigeria, part of the challenge has been a department will be established, and they will call the department community policing department, or even an officer will be named community police relations officer. And as far as the divisional head is concerned, that is all. That's community policing. But no, it requires more than that. It requires a philosophical change within the policing functions. It's very important to note that it's not going to replace the various policing functions that we know, such as investigation, such as traffic control, name them, all the things that the police do today. Rather, it will just change the approach from top to bottom, to now the new paradigm, which is from bottom to top.
Thank you, Mr. Kabir. I want to know and get your take on this. The president vowed to end the crisis, because we all know that this is a growing concern. But I want to know, how do you end the crisis and ensure the safety of the citizens in these areas? What do you think that some of the plans should be, or what is the preparation that needs to be in place to make sure that the citizens actually feel safe and are safe during these crises, and as he tries to end the situations that are going on?
Well, the most important thing is the realization at all levels of governance, at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local government level, as well as the legislative and the executive arm, and to an extent judicial arm, that the protection of the lives and property of every Nigerian is the primary function of government as contained in our constitution.
Yes.
Now, so that anytime one life is lost, at all levels of government, we'll see some kind of response. And that means, you and I, the media, civil society organizations should continue to put pressure on the government. Now, I see the statement by President Buhari as, a political statement. And I say this with all, due respect and sense of responsibility. For me to take what he said seriously, there are changes I need to see. Let's start from climate change. Most people don't see the relationship between climate change and insecurity. There is a lot of a close correlation, really. Is it the land that is being affected that is causing a population shift? And we're seeing the kind of crisis we're seeing in places like Benue, Zamfara to an extent, or the growth in population and the pressure on the land as affected by climate change, or even the grazing reserves that have been taken over for farmland as a result of additional demand for farming due to this growth and climate change. So, number one, what has the government done to tackle climate change and its effects on the population? Second point, our porous borders. Yes, recently the immigration was awarded a contract, or we had from the Federal Executive Council a 55 billion naira contract for borders. How well will that fit into our national security strategy? Well, we've not been told. So what's the government doing to ensure that our porous borders are no longer porous, so that arms and people who shouldn't be in our country are prevented from coming, and the arms are also checked? Thirdly, the arms proliferation within the country, small arms and light weapons. What, in essence, is the government doing to curb small arms and light weapons that are in circulation within the country? We've discussed this in the past. Nigeria and probably Burkina Faso are the only countries in this West African sub-region that are yet to have a commission for mopping up these small arms and light weapons. ECOWAS recommended that through several protocols. Almost all the other 15 member countries have set up those commissions. Nigeria is yet to. What we've had for the past almost 15 years has been a presidential committee. The 8th Assembly has discussed extensively the need to create that commission. But why hasn't Nigeria yet created that commission? So if President Buhari is to convince me that he's serious, he needs to work closely with the 9th Assembly to make sure that that commission is set up immediately to mop up small arms and light weapons. Then governance. What kind of improved governance should we see that would reduce the poverty level in the country, the unemployment rate in the country? Because there is a close correlation between this high poverty and unemployment with the security challenges. So when President Buhari makes such statements, these are the things I would like to see. In Zamfara currently, the governor and most of his senators don't see eye to eye. They are more or less enemies. To an extent, they've even lost the 2019 elections as a result of that. That's a state that is at war, more or less, and you have his leadership at loggerheads. What has President Buhari done? That's an APC state. What has he done to bring this leadership together to ensure they tackle the challenges affecting the country? So for him to walk the talk, I expect to see him do all of these things that I've mentioned, and I'll take his word seriously that he means to tackle insecurity. His overarching sort of focus has been the military approach to tackling security challenges. And we've said it that military approach is just one of the elements that you can use in tackling insecurity. There are several other things that you can do, like I've listed just a few moments ago.
So I'd like to add here that President Buhari actually appealed to the United Nations with regard to the situation in the Lake Chad Basin in recognition of the causal effect between the ecological changes there and spikes in violence in the entire region. So we hope to see some improvement there. There's been a displacement of 2.5 million people, and it does have a direct effect on insecurity. But right now, I want to do a fact-checking exercise with you, if I may. So the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Abbas, declared Operation Puff Adder as a success. Do the facts actually support that? He said that there's been a decline in kidnappings in the country and that the headlines are made up of high-profile victims. That's why there's a hoopla about it, but that the numbers have decreased. Let's start with that. Is that actually accurate?
I don't know why the Chief of Naval Staff will make that statement. Maybe because he's well protected, he has a paraphernalia of security protection around him. But go to the Abuja-Kaduna highway, go to Birningwari, go to Zamfara, go to villages in Katsina. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, the governor of Katsina fielded questions from journalists, and he made an emphatic statement that I think we need to take seriously. He said if the kidnapping threat in his state is not tackled immediately, then there will be food shortage in his state because, of course, farmers cannot go to farm as a result of their fear for kidnapping. So if a state governor from where the president comes from can make such a statement, and then we have the Chief of Naval Staff telling us that there is a decline in kidnapping, I'm not sure where he got his statistics from. I keep a database of kidnapping incidences. Now, I'm not saying my database is accurate, but at least it gives me a reflection of developments within the country. I know that there is, frankly, no decline in kidnapping incidences in the country. And just 2 weeks ago, the Inspector General of Police gave us an indication of what he feels is the kidnapping rate in the country. This was when he met the traditional rulers from the northern part of the country in Kaduna. He said that as at April this year, which is last month, more than 650 persons had been kidnapped across the country, and 75% of this were in the northern part of the country. So frankly, I don't know where the Chief of Naval Staff got his statistics from. There is no decline in kidnapping rate across the country. Yes, the security agencies are responding, but the overall policy changes that we need to see to reduce kidnapping have not been done. Till date, the idea or a policy decision on ransom taking has not been done in Nigeria. And then secondly, the prosecution of those that are arrested for kidnapping, we're not seeing that yet. All we're hearing is they're arresting them, but frankly, I'm not hearing. Even the infamous case of Evans that everybody thought would be a done and deal case, he's yet to be prosecuted. So how do you expect the deterrence element from our criminal justice system to be exercised if you cannot prosecute kidnappers? Mainly because the evidence gathering capabilities of our Nigerian security agencies is very weak. So they arrest them, but they do not have the evidence to take them to court to prosecute them. So for the Chief of Naval Staff to say such a statement, I think it's rather preposterous and ridiculous. He needs to look at the facts, and he needs to look inwards, develop policies and strategies to manage and reduce as well as contain kidnapping, and not make such political statements, frankly.
It's worrying that the Chief of Naval Staff, as for one service chief, would understate such an important issue. So what's the point of all these lengthy 4-hour meetings? They've had 2 in 1 week, and he's understating the facts. And you raise a really important point. The Inspector General of Police, or the acting IGP, was proud to bandy figures such as 157 kidnappers arrested, 208 armed robbers arrested, but where are the prosecutions? So to my next fact check that I'd like to do was the report that the Minister of Interior was consulting with the Miyetti Allah group, and large amounts of money were promised to them in exchange for peace. How accurate has this been?
Based on our understanding, there may have been such discussions. What the content of the discussions were, we honestly don't know. We have always, I personally have advocated for, a socio-political solution to the challenge, especially the one involving farmers and herders, and then, of course, to an extent, banditry. Now, I must be very clear on this. Banditry is a crime element, and it must be dealt with under our criminal justice system. But if there are root causes to the banditry, then it is the onus is on government to address those root causes. And if we agree that most of the bandits are Fulani of extraction, by the way, I'm one, then we need to identify what are the root causes. Why is it that a man who used to have 100 herds of cattle no longer has those 100 herds of cattle, and today he has picked up a gun and has become a bandit? Why? Is it because his cattle was rustled and then he went to the security agencies to report it, and instead of them to help him recover the stolen cattle, they started extorting money from him, and then along the way he decided to pick up weapons, or from like what happened in Zamfara case, vigilantes were set up, and then these vigilantes started profiling Fulanis and killing Fulanis. And then is it that the Fulanis decided to now start protecting themselves by forming groups and arming those groups, and then crime crept into that? Now, if that is the case, is it not necessary to do a socio-political investigation and then bring up sociological challenges? I am not an advocate for the payment of money to any group to settle any crime element. Crime needs to be dealt with under our criminal justice system. The offender needs to be arrested, and then he needs to be taken to court to be prosecuted. So unless and until the Minister of Interior comes clean with the details of his discussion with the Miyetti Allah, we wouldn't know what the truth behind that is. I must also note that it is my sincere opinion that the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, as well as the Miyetti Allah Kautal Hore groups, do not represent the entire Fulanis. In reality, especially the Fulanis that have picked up arms and the ones who are feeling marginalized, because let's remember, this is the root cause of the issue, a perception and a feeling of marginalization, lack of representation within governance. Now, they do not feel that Miyetti Allah, both the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, which is Magban, and then Miyetti Allah Cattle Hori, represent them. These are political associations that are representing cattle rearers, but they frankly do not represent this other group that are feeling marginalized. So if the Minister of Interior is hoping to reach out to this other group that is feeling marginalized, it is a very wrong approach to go through the Miyetti Allah. He needs to go set up committees, look for experts who will reach out to these people, understand why they are doing what they are doing. The ones that are willing to abandon what they are doing, they abandon it. The ones that are not, and like I said before, let's use our criminal justice system to arrest offenders and prosecute offenders. But negotiation at this stage is not what I am advocating, especially with a group that is merely political and does not represent the interest of this other group that is feeling marginalized.
Wow. Thank you, Kabir. Kabir, we have one last question for you before we go. And I wanted to talk to you about the intelligence community and the failure of the intelligence community. Why is it that our intelligence community cannot get their heads wrapped around the issue of, be it banditry, be it kidnapping? How can we prevent more than sort of this all-out war against insecurity?
Now we need to look at the history of the intelligence community in Nigeria. As far back as when the NSO was set up, and then the military under President Buhari, broke down the NSO into 3 or 4 organizations, which is the National Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then the Department of State Services. Now, most intelligence organizations respond to the directive of the leadership or the regime in place at that point in time. Now, because they were set up under a military era, most of their functions happen to be regime protection. How do they keep the regime in place? And then, unfortunately for us, we had a situation where we had the government of late President Abacha, who was more or less a pariah government across the world. And the intelligence community responded by trying to protect him. And I think that legacy is what we're suffering from today. Most of the intelligence agencies that are in Nigeria have respond or gather intelligence to put further the regime or the administration in place. So anything they would do that would help a particular administration is what they would do. The national interest, which is what should be concerning us, in this case, the insecurity challenges, is actually, unfortunately, secondary to their intelligence collection and gathering functions. They first look at regime protection before they now look at those issues. Now, how do we need to change this? Firstly, the legislative arm of government, especially the National Assembly, it's too late for the 8th Assembly to do anything, but the 9th Assembly, they need to look at the laws governing the operations of these intelligence organizations and then change them in such a manner that they are more responsive to the requirements of our national interest, both the domestic and then the international national interest and requirements. And then more importantly, the checks and balances that should be in place for oversight functions by the legislative arm of government, they need to empower that as well, so that where the executive arm of government is putting too much pressure or attention on the intelligence agencies, the legislative arm can check that. Then we also need to look at the Office of the National Security Advisor. Remember that that office is the coordinating unit for intelligence within the country. Do we currently have an intelligence fusion center where all the organizations that collect intelligence are putting intelligence, and then everyone who needs that intelligence is able to collect it and use it for purpose? I don't think we have that. There has been presidential directive for the establishment of such fusion centers, but we haven't seen it yet. I believe that there should be a fusion center in Abuja and then across all the 6 geopolitical zones of the country, so that even you and I, if we have information, we can send it, let's say, to the Civil Defense Corps, or even to a private security firm that should now send it to the Ministry of Interior, who will now send it to that intelligence fusion center. Then the DSS, the Immigration Service, name them, can pick it up and then use it. Right now, we do not have that. They are all operating in silos. There is an argument between who should be the custodian of that intelligence fusion center. If the national interest was paramount, then that kind of disagreement between the various intelligence agencies would not arise. So to answer your question directly, the collection of intelligence has been very weak within the country, both in terms of the means of collection, which is the human means, as well as the technical means, and then in terms of, even after we collect it, how do we use it? So if there's going to be an improvement in intelligence collection, as well as its use to tackle insecurity, all of these things that I've mentioned need to be addressed. And I'm hoping that in President Buhari's second term, as well as the 9th Assembly that is coming in, all of these things will be looked into so that we have a functional and capable intelligence community that is responsive to our national interests and not to regime protection.